Hi, my name is Doug Vogt from the Untitled Foundation, and it took about 2.5 to 3 months to do this video because the quantity of research I had to do, because this video is probably the second most important one I've done in the series. This is series 12, and because the first most important obviously is series 4, which explains what causes the Ice Age. Geomagnetic or polar reversals, the Ice Age, and what's going to happen to you in perhaps 26 years. During the various videos, I've mentioned that the reason why no one figured it out is because they were stuck with this matter-oriented theory of existence, and that handicapped them the most. I did say I was going to explain what happened and why man was stuck with this matter-oriented theory of existence, which obviously originated with Aristotle. So, this is what I'm going to cover. How has the science changed? Why was the philosophy of Aristotle adopted by the church? Who, why, and when was the calendar changed to BC and AD? Who really was Aristotle in Greece? What was the chain of custody of his writings? I don't think anyone's done that, by the way. And which family, Roman family, controlled the only copies of Aristotle? Aristotle is basically presents a matter-oriented theory of existence. It is the foundation of our current day science, and that is why you're having such a problem trying to figure out these phenomena and how it fits into reality. The Greeks, as well as later the Romans, used Moses' 10 code systems, small numbering, large numbering sequence systems, cumulative numbering. Larger names are made up of smaller names, and that's the real message. They were all using Moses' code system. So if you're a scholar and you want to learn what really happened, here's your chance. Go pick up the book and you'll know the code systems that the Romans used. This is my copy of the Loeb's Classics, about 180 some odd volumes, but that's not nearly enough. I'd like to thank Harvard University Press and Loeb's for giving me 3 months free, later I bought a whole subscription, of the entire Loeb's Classics, which includes 625 volumes. So that's why it took so long to do this. And obviously, the other one I'd like to thank tremendously is Sir Ronald Syme, the late Ronald Syme from Oxford. He was the foremost expert on why these Roman aristocracy used different names and how the names fit into certain people. It's not easy. This is very difficult scholarship. The information I'm going to give you in this video, and as well as the next one, is the level of bishop and cardinal level of the Roman Catholic Church. This is what they know, at least most of them, we assume. The other person I'd like to thank is Bernard D. Green, an old friend of mine who died in March of 2015. He wrote under the name of Abelard Reichland. Okay. Who was this video intended for? Number one, the science community. Scientists is number one, because you should understand why and how the science was changed. It was unbeknownst to you, and when you went to school in the 3rd and 4th grade and they started teaching you science, some science course, you had no idea this is what you were going to be programmed, or I should say brainwashed, to think, and only one way. Like I described in Series 1, a few of the major scientists in physics knew something was wrong. They just couldn't put their finger on it or never explored it more than, a thought they had. Why I chose to include this series? Well, the theory of multidimensional reality is the antithesis of a matter theory of existence. That's why. So you need to know it, and this is the key of figuring out everything else. Part 1 is not about religion, it's about history. For Aristotelian philosophy was so important in forming the current day matter-oriented science philosophy. Nobody disagrees with that. I mean, we're stuck with it. The moral lesson in this series is a lie is a terrible thing that affects society for thousands of years. The Torah says, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not lie. And you're going to understand the ramifications of their lie, why, and that is the reason why you couldn't figure it out, that this sun nova during the full reversal and how the universe really works is because of what they did 2,000 years ago. This video won't cover why. That's in part 2. This will give you when, who, and where were involved. A short summary of between Plato's philosophy and Aristotle. Plato, you have the idea of an apple, and then you have the physical manifestation of an apple. Aristotle, they're one and the same. And you'll see that in later quotes. Okay, how did we wind up with BC and AD? It's because of this monk. There's his name. In 525 CE, that means Common Era. He and the church basically decided to change, because they didn't really have an accurate calendar, and I'll explain the thing between the Roman calendar and the two ways they were counting years. So what he did was, this is Arya Jr., and the hairdressers of the Temple of Vesta. Now, I'd like to thank somebody that had keyed into the Temple of Vesta and what happened to her. Barbara Rosenfeld is her name. She's writing a book on the subject. She deserves the credit for coming into it. Now, the hairdressers are unique for the Temple of Vesta. You know, Vestal virgins, you've heard of that. I'll explain it more in part 2. This thing on top of her head means she was the head Vestal virgin. They're in for 30 years. They go in at 7 years old, and then they graduate. Well, this is what she looked like after she graduated. Roman statues. By the way, the Romans did beautiful carvings, beautiful workmanship in marble. Absolutely gorgeous. Okay. Two kinds of numbering. One was an estimate of when Rome was founded by Romulus, and the first king was Numa Pompilia. But so they were measuring it by the Greek Olympiads. But archaeologists think they're probably wrong. There's 7 hills to Rome, and before there was just like little villages on top of the hills, but not really a city or anything. They think around 625 it actually became a city, or something that could start. The problem with the other way is they would measure the number of years by how many years an emperor, Caesar, was in power. So here's some Roman coins of M. Cato struck this in 89 BC. There is no dates on any of these things. Here's another one of Romulus and Remus, and no dates, nothing. They think this is 725 to 755 BCE. Here's more examples. Roman Empire, this is Trajan. Again, no dates on any of this stuff. Lucas Calpurnius Piso, he struck a coin. Last name was Fergie, 90 BCE estimates. So, by the way, all these dates of BC could be off by 37 to 41 years because of what this guy did. He backdated it from basically when Caligula took office and when she graduated, and what they did is went back 37 years and said that was the year 0. It'll become clear in part 2 what it was. Now, these are Greek coins. Again, no dates whatsoever. This is supposed to be of Alexander the Great. In truth, when I was reading the Roman stuff, they said that the older statues were carved wood. So they probably wouldn't have lasted, 600 or 700 BC to when he's doing this stuff at, year 30 to 50, 100 AD. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to survive. But the Romans redid the statues in marble, and they're absolutely gorgeous. By the way, the coinage doesn't lie. Their writings do, but the coinage doesn't lie. Now, the first step in forensics is, okay, who mentions Aristotle? Well, he's Greek. Supposedly, he lived from 356 to 323 BCE. Dies shortly after, I think, Alexander the Great dies. So this is the estimated birth and death dates of Homer and the rest of these Greeks. These are truly Greeks, not Romans writing as Greek. That's another thing you have to realize. The Romans, Italy was probably a Greek colony on both western and eastern slopes of Italy. Because the soil was so bad in Greece, they sent off colonies off to basically farm. So whether Rome was, probably was very, very far back, but the Romans were always interested and enamored by Greek culture. All the Roman aristocracy spoke fluently and wrote in Greek, besides Latin, but Greek was it. Okay, so we go on, and now you don't expect anybody to be quoting him because he doesn't live yet. He's not alive yet. All these, one person, Aristotle and Demosthenes as generals. This is Thucydides. Well, it can't be right because Aristotle wasn't even alive yet. So you could tell right off the bat these dates are wrong. Oh, by the way, this column is the volume in the Loeb Classics. So if you want to check it, go to Loeb Classic, that volume number, and you can check this stuff. But he mentions in here, and I had to read it, mentions Alexander, Aristotle, Demosthenes, Aristotle, I listed again, but Aristotle as a general. And it's just, so it's obviously these dates are way off. Loeb's History of the Peloponnesian War. They also sent Demosthenes, who had led the army of the Athenians into Aetolia, to come and be their leader, as well as for 20 Athenian ships, which happened to be off the coast of Peloponnesia, under the command of Aristotle, son of such and such. Now, this is the only mention you've got so far. Here, all Greek writings, this is Greek philosophy, or the Greek poets that are really Greek. Nothing. Nobody mentions them. Footnote only attributed to a piso fragment, which means you could take that and wipe your ass with it. Hippocrates. Now, special note is being made here. Hippocrates is doctors take the Hippocratic Oath. A Greek, supposedly this is his dates. He mentions the Roman galleon. Here it is. Here's the reference. Page 411 of volume 149. All the chief surgical comments, Apollonius, that's also a pen name. I'll tell you what it is now. It's kind of funny. Quotes Apollonius, and these are the names reside at the closure of the radius only, a direction of which we call forward and backward through. Galen says that the fracture such and such. It's the medical stuff. Galen was the father of Roman medicine. So the problem is these people didn't exist yet for another 500 years. That's the problem. Galen was the elder brother of Emperor Marcus Aurelius. So, okay, Apollonius you'll see a number of times here. Again, it's a composite name. Apollo was a Greek god. His father was Zeus, and he was the father of a lot of other gods. Big god. Apollo, but Nius in Greek means son. So God's son. Now reverse it, and you have son of God. Sound familiar? Xenophon. Now this, you'd think he would mention something about another philosopher. No. Plato. Supposedly Aristotle's a student. Oh, such a great student. Winds up supposedly inheriting his school. No. doesn't mention him once. Socrates, nothing. Nobody is mentioning him at all, or who are Greeks, and they should have. Euclid, this is another interesting one. Suppose this is his dates. Euclid is mathematics and stuff like that, but look what it says. Volume 335, page 849. Attributed to Euclid. Again, seeing that Apollonius himself is not called to account, though he left the most part of his conics incomplete. Moreover, Apollonius was able to add the lacking portion of the theory of the locus through having become familiar beforehand with what had been written about it by Euclid, through having spent, get this, much time with Euclid's pupils at Alexandria, that's in Egypt, whence he delivered his scientific habit of mind. This is a joke. Oh, by the way, this name here, he mentions up here, is a minor Greek god, fictional character. Here's another reference, page 481. The contents of Apollonius come in 3 books, and there they are, of Euclid and collections most skillful, blah, blah, blah. Now, other people added to that, but there should be a red flag for a lot of you mathematicians out there. You mean the writings of Euclid is not of really a Greek at all? How do you like that? Yeah, Greek writers that mention, where are there Greek writers that mention Aristotle? Collection, this is one here. Apollonius, who completed the 4 books of Euclid, this is more on Euclid. Conics and added another 4, gave us 8 books of conics. Now, Euclid didn't write this stuff. This guy, Apollonius, is the one who wrote it. You're going to find out who Apollonius is. So it goes on, and then when I'm mentioning those books are still extant, they still exist. It goes on and on, but it's very interesting. It comes up over and over again, this guy Apollonius and other Romans, but very plainly, it's just, you don't know what you're reading. Remember, the victors write the history. Roman kingdom, 753 to 509. That was the kingdom stuff. This is Numa Pompilia, supposedly what he looked like, but this is a Roman statue. This is Newman right here. This is an early tracing of a coin, and this is what Newman's supposed to look like there. Then we have Gnaeus Piso. This is like about 40, 50 BCE. He's doing one with this kind of a face. Doesn't look anything like that. Looks more like this one, but there's a reason why. And supposedly this is when Numa Pompilia reigned. So he's part myth, but we'll assume that he did actually exist, but they had no picture of him. They didn't know what he looked like at all. This is supposedly a coin of it. Obviously you can't tell anything from that. Okay, so second king of Rome was him. Roman Republic was 509 to 27 BCE. That was run by the Roman Senate, and they would appoint the king or the Caesar. Roman Empire, 27 to 395, and then they split to the Western and Eastern empires. This is a picture of an artist's rendition of the Roman Senate. We model our Senate after them, and so did parliaments in Europe. Once you find out and you read what these people have done, a bigger bunch of crooks and killers you couldn't get in one place other than the Roman Senate. These people were vicious. Strabo. Strabo was not a geographer, even though he wrote geography. It's really the pen name of Julius Caesar. And he's very telling. He was very helpful in who it really was, in helping the chain of custody of who had the library of Aristotle, which right now all we know for sure is he was an admiral in Alexander the Great's navy. That's all we know for sure so far. So, first Aristotle bequeathed his own library to Theophractus, to whom he also left a school. Gee, what happened to Aristotle? I guess he didn't get it. Theophractus bequeathed it to Nellus, the son of Croesus. I'm going to butcher these names, just bear with me. Who not only was a pupil of Aristotle and Theophractus, but also inherited the library of Theophractus, which included that of Aristotle. Nellus took it to Cypicus. Nellus bequeathed it to his heirs, ordinary people. This is where it gets kind of funny and interesting. Now, you can figure between when Aristotle supposedly dies at 322 and this happens, you could add another maybe 40 years, 50 years. So he gives it to his ordinary people who kept the books locked up and not even carefully stored. But when they heard how zealous the Attical kings, whom the city was subject, were searching for books to build up the library in Pergamum, they hid their books underground in a kind of trench. One describes it as a root cellar. Lovely place to put scrolls, huh? But much later, when the books had been damaged by moisture and moss, and probably worms too, descendants sold them to Apelkon of Teos, died about 84 BCE. So it's a long, at least it looks like about 200 plus years, this family had it and kept it in a root cellar, and then that's what happened. So they had this thing in pieces. Okay, and they sold it for a large sum of money, and that was it. Okay, the fourth chain of custody. Apelkon was a bibliograph, known as a bookseller, a librarian. Rather than a philosopher, and therefore seeking a restoration of the parts that had been eaten through, he made new copies of the text, filling up the gaps incorrectly and publishing the books full of errors. Philosophies and Aristotelians, guys who followed philosophy and Aristotle, were forced to call most of their statements probabilities because of the large number of errors available in the text. The fifth, Trinion, the grammarian, who was fond of Aristotle, got in his hands by paying court to the librarian, as did also certain booksellers who used bad copyists and would not collect the text. Now, it sounds like this guy sold off pieces to booksellers and to this guy. So not the whole thing, but pieces of it. Sixth, Rome also contributed to much of this, for immediately after the death of Apelkon, Sulla, that was General Sulla, he was the one who defeated the Athenians finally after their revolt. And he took the library of him and took it back to Rome. This is Sulla, and this is a coin of Sulla. Again, no dates. Plutarch. Plutarch, again, is a composite name from two different things. Plutarch, the first part is Pluto, who was the guard of earthly wealth, and Archos for Greek would be higher exalted. So higher exalted god, Pluto. It's a fictional name of Arrius Calpurnius Piso. Volume 8, page 407. He was now initiated into the mysteries of and seized for himself the library of Apelkon the Trion, in which were most of the treatises of Aristotle and Theophractus, at that time not well known to the public. Of course, no one saw it. It was brought back to Rome about 70 BCE. Seventh person, Marcus Tullius Lucullus, a general. He was the assistant. Sulla was the commander of the army there in Greece. He was the second in command. He got his hands on the library as this is all from all from Caesar. Wound up at the library, including only the copies of Aristotle. When he died, he left it to his son, Lucullus. It remained in the son's library even when J. Cato and later Cicero became young Cullius's guardian. Actually, this part wasn't, and this part wasn't in Strabo. This I had to compile and figure out. This is hard stuff to figure out, not easy. Basically, I wound up reading a good chunk of this guy's work. This is Cicero. Basically, they were all kind of lawyers. The reason why they were studying Plato and what was left of Aristotle and others is to find techniques of arguing, how to structure an argument or take someone else's argument apart. That's why they were studying it. No, they were learning law. That's what they were. And it says it within their text that they're practicing law here and stuff like that. Okay, proof of number 7, Cicero, volume 40 in there. I was down at my place at Tusculum and wanted to consult some books from the library of the young Lucullus. So I went to his country house, as I was in habit of doing, to help myself to the volumes I needed. On my arrival, seating in the library, I found Marcus Cato. He was related to Lucullus by marriage. His daughter or something like that. They were related. I had not known he was there. He was surrounded by piles of books on Stoicism. I'll have to explain why the Stoicism and why this is all coming to a head. Page 225. My reason for coming on here was to get some books from the library by way Cato. It will soon be time for our friend Lucullus, that's the boy, to make acquaintance with his fine collection, for I hope he will take more pleasure in his library than in all the other appointments of his country house. Lucullus, the general, had a gorgeous, extravagant country house. It was beautiful, gorgeous, amazing. Now, as he came back from Greece with a lot of money. Anyway, further on Cato and Cicero, Cato then resumed, quote, "But what, pray, are the books that you must come here for when you have so large a library of your own?" Let me explain something. Knowledge was power to these people. The bigger the library, the more power they had because they had more knowledge of history and etc. A little different from today, huh? "I have come to fetch some notebooks of Aristotle," I replied, "which I knew were here. I wanted to read them during my holiday. I do not often get any leisure. How I wish," said he, "that you had thrown in your lot with the Stoics." Cicero didn't. Okay, let me explain. There was an issue in Rome about this time. Seneca talks about that the people who light candles, that was the Jews, are giving laws to the conqueror. And what the scholars say is about 10% of the Roman population, the Roman Empire, had become Jews. Now, in Rome, the aristocracy, certainly the Caesars, in their coinage tells the whole story that they would support or fund or manage one of the Roman gods, which were really copies of Greek gods. So that's what they were doing. So a Roman family would wind up managing or supporting a family. So you have some with the Temple of Jupiter on the back of the coin, or the Temple of Vesta, and it goes on and on like that, Mars and others. Basically, I had to go through his 2 big books on Roman coins, and that tells the whole story. Like I said, the coinage doesn't lie. I just wish they had dates on them. Like I said, the dates were from how long an emperor was emperor, and they killed him off, then they started a new year. That's how the legal system worked there. So there was a crisis in Rome. They had old religion, Stoicism, they had this plethora of other religions, Greek religions. And then you had this upstart Judaism, kind of spreading in the empire because it made more sense than the stuff they were teaching and practicing. It was all for one thing, to control the masses. Okay, number 8, Marcus Calpurnius Piso occupied Lucullius's house after an attempted revolt. Julius Caesar's third wife was Calpurnia, the daughter of Gnaeus, his father. Marcus's father was Gnaeus. Cicero, again, another reference. O good old house, alas, how different the owner who now owneth thee, and in these times that may be said of many a house. For example, who copies the virtues of Lucius Lucullius, excellent man that he was already dead because of another palace coup, trying to engineer. But how many are who have copied the magnificence of his villas? Footnote, members of Caesar's party were now occupying the house. Plutarch, this shows, and here's a reference for it. A little while after, Caesar took Calpurnia to wife, a daughter of Gnaeus Piso, and got Piso made counsel of the coming, for the coming year. That is Marcus. Not a real pleasant looking guy, huh? Here's the family tree in the beginning. Gnaeus Calpurnius Piso. Now, he's hard to figure out a lot of times because in Cicero, there's an error in the lobes, and I have to write them a letter and tell them. When they abbreviated, when you go from Gnaeus or Gaius, from the Greek to the Latin, the G is written like a C. The way they would abbreviate Gnaeus was C lowercase n period. And Gaius was C, that was it. The problem is, when the translator, I think what happened is the Pisos later on after the copy they had of Cicero, and after Cicero died, removed the lowercase n and period. So when the translator went through it, he was thinking this is Gaius, Calpurnius Piso. But that's impossible, you'll see it in a second. He's living here to 58 BCE. He has 2 kids, Calpurnia, that's actually a tracing of a coin. Calpurnia, P-I-S is short for Piso. And it looks like it's his 5th wife, and that's Julius Caesar. Marcus Calpurnius Piso, this is one of his pen names. Now, the reason why they had different names and pen names is because when he was the governor in Spain, they were plotting things. And so Cicero was. And he had a right to him in code, so they picked names. Usually you could figure out the names. Some are a little obscure, though. That's one of the things that Sir Ronald Syme was very good at, but some things he didn't figure out, though. He has 2 sons. Lucius was the older one, and Gaius the younger one. He not even mentioned in Cicero's works, so why he wasn't even born at the time of Cicero. That's the joke of it. So that's the colossal mistake they did. When they found Lucius Calpurnius Piso's house is known as the Librarian, died in 68 CE, and it was in Pompeii. And when the house was destroyed, when Vesuvius erupted in 79, they excavated it, and J. Paul Getty must have been told his importance, and he reconstructed it just north of Los Angeles, or north of Santa Monica. I was there. That's a younger me, with dark hair this time. Anyway, the library was taken out beforehand. The son died a couple of years later, again in another conspiracy against the emperor. Licinius Piso was killed by Emperor Otto in 69 CE. The library then went to Arius Calpurnius Piso, the son of Gaius Calpurnius Piso, because he was already dead, because he was part of the leader of the Pisonian conspiracy to assassinate Emperor Nero. it gets complicated. I told you it was a den of thieves and crooks and murderers they were. And so that's what happened. Now, the proof for number 10 of this, you have to know all of Arius Calpurnius Piso's pen names, and he had a lot of them. Josephus was one of them. Now, the reason I chose Joseph, like I explained in volume 2 on Joseph, is that he had figured out, and maybe the only one besides myself, who figured out who Joseph was in Egypt and what he did, and that he got all that money for the sale of the grain. And he, Arius Calpurnius Piso, was looking for that gold and silver to raise an army to become emperor, and for a good reason. And I'll explain it in a few minutes. But anyway, that's it. So Josephus is really Arius Calpurnius Piso. I've decided to have our law translated, the Jewish law. Here he's playing the part of a Jew who was captured by the Romans, brought back to Rome, and was allowed to write Jewish books and live in a palatial state. This is insane. This guy supposedly, in his own story, throws fenugreek, which is burning oil, down on the Roman guards below him, and he wasn't going to get slaughtered after they captured him. Forget it. It's just a pure lie. Well, translated, and when it has been rendered from the Hebrew into a Greek text and have it deposited in my library. That's the Septuagint. Plutarch, again, Piso's pen name. Here's the references for it. You go check it yourself. He said of Aristotle that he was a river of liquid gold. The word Flavius, which he was related to the Flavian emperors, the Flavian family, in Latin means golden yellow. That's why silence is golden. There's an inner circle. C.S. Lewis talks about it. Those who know the great secret, namely that the Calpurnius Pisos of Rome wrote certain things, religious documents, besides Aristotle. I don't even know how many people know that he also wrote Aristotle. But, so that's why he's giving clues like this. They can't help themselves. They love giving clues that they did it. This guy had one of the biggest egos on the planet. Julian, fragment from a letter to a priest, Timothy. It's really Timothy, that's what Julian is. Timothy was the son of Fabius Justus. That was Arius Piso's middle son, surviving son. And there's the reference. And I too think like Apollodorus. Now that I think was really, Apollo is God and Doris means gift of God. You like that? That the rest are not worth mentioning compared with those two. As for your collection of the works of Aristotle, so much I will say, you have made me style myself your pupil, though I have no right to be the title. Again, that is Arius Calpurnius Piso's grandson. Like I said, you're getting knowledge that cardinals and bishops have, and that's the extent of it. Real scholars of Roman history. Eusebius, that's really this guy, Eusebius, half-brother of Emperor Constantine. This is much later in life, in time. The time and the origin of the Josephus, who collected so much material in the work, just dealt with. He was the most famous Jew of that time, not only among his fellow countrymen, but also among the Romans, so that he was honored by the erection of a statue in the city of Rome. And the inclusion of the works composed by him in its library, he compiled the whole ancient history of the Jews in 20 volumes. It was everybody's history, and when he didn't like, he wrote, as well as his ancestors. Proof Aristotle was an unknown Greek until Cicero and the Pisos got their hands on it. Cicero, Topica. There's the volume and there's the page. But you were repelled from reading the works by their obscurity, and that great teacher replied in that he was not acquainted with these works, which are, as I think, by Aristotle. I am not indeed astonished in the slightest degree in that the philosopher was unknown to the teacher of the oratory, for he is ignored by all except a few of the professed philosophers. You can guess who they are. Diogenes Laertes was Ulpian, aka Origen, aka Ulpian. His name was Ulpianus, descended from Emperor Trajan. And that's what they figure what his years were. This is going to be a shocker to all. At first you probably think, hey, what's Doug talking about? Aristotle, of course, is the Greek. You're going to get a big shocker, especially you scientists, because these are the people who did it to you. Don't blame me, blame them. There were in all 8 Aristotles. Our philosopher himself, that's even doubtful. An Athenian statement of author of a graceful forensic speeches, that's legal speeches. That's Cicero, no question about it. A scholar who commanded on the Iliad, probably Marcus C. Piso. He was very, very good in Greek. Cicero even mentions it. A Sicilian rhetorician who wrote a reply to the panegyric of Isocratics, which he did. The discipline of Socratic philosopher surnamed myth. Surnamed myth, a myth is a fiction, a mythology. That's probably Arius Calpurnius Piso he's mentioning. A native of, it goes on, a trainer of boys mentioned, and an obscure grammarian whose handbook on redundancy is still extant. That's him. That's Diogenes. He's writing about himself. And that's what he looks like. Okay, we'll start in. Now, you know the years that Aristotle was supposedly died at 322. So this is the early ones. They wouldn't expect anybody here to know about Aristotle because he didn't live yet. Now, when you start with Aristotle, he doesn't mention his father under either name at all in any of the books of Aristotle. Mentions nothing about being an admiral in the Navy, which he was. Okay, so we go on. None of these should know about them. Remember, this is all stuck in a cave in a root cellar in Greece. But about here, it should show up, but nobody's saying anything. It implies, okay, this is Polypus, which means many lives. So it's a pen name of somebody. I'm not going to sit down and try to figure it out. You can when you wind up reading this stuff. They give clues in their writings of who it is. But Polypus means many lives. And he mentions it here 10 times, implying he was a general. Julius Caesar, he's not talking about that at all. Cicero. Here's your second author. And you'll see how many times he mentions, this is how many times he mentions Aristotle and which volumes he mentions them. He also mentions Marcius and Gennaeus and Gaius, Lucius and stuff like that, the Pisos. More of the same. Letter to friend from Cicero. From my youth, composed, as I was saying, 3 volumes in the form of an argument and dialogue on the orator, in the manner, so at least I intended, of Aristotle. I think your son, Lucius Piso, will find them of some use. In other words, what he's admitting here, he wrote 3 volumes, an oratory, in the style of Aristotle. In other words, he's admitting he wrote some of the volumes in Aristotle, certainly on oratory. He's admitting it. Cicero, more of them. Well, I said, Piso, with this unusual ambiguity, let us all join forces to promote the lad's, Lucius Piso's, improvement, especially let us try to make him spare some of his interest for philosophy. Goes on. Later they mention Aristotle as the philosophy they intended him to do. Cicero Brutus. By the way, this is the same Brutus. So Et Brute, who stabbed Caesar in the back. Cicero is part of that plot, as well as, well, Cato, I think, disappears fewer years before for the same reason, for another plot. Anyway, he talks about Marcius Piso. Piso had results of training, and of all who had gone before him, none was more thoroughly versed in Greek learning. Kind of implies that they did work together and they were adding stuff in Greek and putting it under the name of Aristotle. Remember, the Pisos had the only copies of Aristotle. Nobody else had them. He's using a name that was in the past. Cicero, Brutus, for staying with Marcius Piso, a young man. See, it shows you, we got different time periods here. This is where he's older, this was younger. But already given up to his pursuit, possessing a talent of the highest order and deeply devoted to myself. Oratory. He became a lawyer. Okay, I'll go on further. Here's our friend Lucullus, General Lucullus. He's the guy who brings it to Rome at about 70 BCE. So he mentions it, but not as a philosopher at all. Apollonius of Perga, it's probably not Arius, it's probably one of his relatives, and it couldn't have been then. It was, the dates obviously are completely wrong. Number one, it wasn't in Rome yet, and also the dates aren't right. Right now, at this period of time, it was in a root cellar someplace in Greece. So it's all made up stuff, made up dates. It does mention architects, and that was Marcius Piso. He was an architect. Here, Pollio Marcius Calpurnius Piso, a.k.a. Apollo. He was an architect. He was a military architect and others, and he writes about it and includes it in. There's your third author. Horace, nothing. Livy, Titus, Livius, nothing. Then mentions Numa Pompilia. Livia, Ovid, of course, Strabo, which is Julius Caesar, I quoted earlier. He mentions them in these volumes. Valerius Paterculus, the father of Emperor Vespasian, Arius Calpurnius Piso, maternal great-grandfather. Gaius C. Piso's father-in-law. He mentions him once. There's a relationship there. Seneca the Elder mentions Aristotle. Quintus Max, the Lives of Homer, mentions him. Because remember, these people had access to Lucullius's library, which finally became Piso's library. Philo of Alexandria, that was Herodias, Attius, Herod or Agrippa II. Herod Agrippa II was his real name. That's who wrote Philo of Alexandria. Mentions it twice, but had more than one author in these things, not just one, but multiple. Piso probably wrote these two, because this guy dies at around 50 CE. Piso himself is born at 37 CE. And so he probably added to it and tried to backdate basically the existence of Aristotle and what he was saying. Sellus, nothing. Juvenal was an independent writer. He mentions it once in Code. And there's the Code. Philo, on eternity of the world. But Aristotle surely showed a pious and religious spirit. Give me a break. When in opposition to this view, he said that the world was uncreated and indestructible and denounced whatever the philosophy was. Some say that the author of this doctrine was not Aristotle, but certain Pythagoreans. You'll see that name later on used as a code. They're hinting at Pythagoras or Pythagorean mathematics. Aristotle, who had too much respect for philosophy to falsify anything. This is probably the volume that Arius Calpurnius Piso himself wrote. A teacher can have no more trustworthy witness than a disciple, and well, I'm going to go on. Okay, but sought earnestly to transcend the truth discovered by the ancients, and so struck out anew. He's admitting he's writing new stuff on the name of Aristotle. He's admitting it there. Juvenal, a satirist. He had to write in code because his works will be destroyed. And in fact, they did cut off his works. I think it was the 16th book on the 60th line. Point 1, they are ignoramuses, although you will find their houses without exception stuffed full of plaster busts of whoever. This is because the most perfect of them, he's talking about the Pisos, is the one who has brought a lifelike Aristotle, or Pitak, who has his shelf displayed originals of Clenthius and company. There is no trusting appearances. He's hinting at it's just crap. I'll go on. Seneca the Younger was a friend of the Piso, and friend of Gaius Calpurnius Piso. He and Gaius had to commit suicide when their plot to assassinate Emperor Nero came to light. So he mentions Piso, Numa Pompeia, he mentions Aristotle, because they're buddies, they're working on it. This one mentions it about agriculture. It's possible that the original Aristotle, if you're an admiral in a navy, you're going to write about the places you saw, the countries you conquered, about the people, maybe their agriculture. Nothing about the philosophy is ever mentioned here, though. Pliny the Younger. That was the younger brother, half-brother of Arius Calpurnius Piso. He helped him in other writings, but he didn't mention anything about Aristotle, because he didn't touch it, probably. Quintus Curtius, all these other Roman writers. Quintilian, twice mentioned Lucullus, the library. By the way, I had to go through all of these volumes, and I saved either from a paragraph to a few sentences every place they mention Aristotle. If those of you who are scholars out there, and I have a Word file that's about 115 pages of these quotes from the lobes. If you want them, if you want me to send you a thing, contribute $20 to the Dihol Foundation, and I'll burn you a CD, or you send me a SIM chip, SMD chip, and I'll copy it onto there with some other stuff. I'll give you maybe the family trees of the Pisos, and you can go figure this stuff out yourself and go have some fun. Anyway, goes on, but these aren't the authors. Josephus, aka Arius Calpurnius Piso, mentions him there, Aristotle, but he also mentions Lucullus, Piso, Lucullus, his library, Cicero, Piso, the father and the grandfather. Now, under Plutarch, this is where he really does the work on Aristotle. He mentions Numa Pompilius 79 times. Apollo, that's the Greek god, Apollo 141 times. That's more than any of the other Greek writers combined. Aristotle, 156 times. Eris, that's the Greek god of war, 42 times. Apollonius of Tyana, 12 times. Apollonius of Rhodes, which is probably his father or grandfather. And that's it. Plutarch is Arius Calpurnius Piso. This is a letter to Apollonius of Rhodes. It's not himself, it's probably writing it to his grandfather, who was then dead by then. So, since we're at Plutarch, this is an older statue of Plutarch, and this is a younger one. You can see it the same facial features, big lips. This has got a beard, this one doesn't have a beard, but same eyes, the eyebrows, the eyes, the nose, the lips. That's interesting. Here's Numa Pompeia, second king of Rome. This is the coin I showed you earlier. It doesn't look anything like him. Got a beard. This is Numa here. That's a Roman statue. Got the beard. That's the same face as this one. And you can see the similarity between that and that. It's the same face. How do you like that? Gee, I wonder why. More Plutarch. Mentioned Numa Pompeia here. Mentioned all over. Okay. Diodorus of Siculius is Sicily. So it's gift of God from Sicily. It's actually Emperor Trajan, who reigned from 98 to 117. I hope you can read this stuff on this graph. I hope you can. This is how many times he mentions them. Aristotle was an admiral. Here mentions as an admiral. Now this one here I'm going to go into right now, in the next slide. Aristotle, a.k.a. Battus. And you'll understand why. Now this is the emperor, so they couldn't destroy his writings. Diodorus Siculus, the library, a history of Emperor Trajan. Okay. Aristotle, who was also called Battus, he's the only one who says that, by the way. There was a Greek king, Battus, but he's the only one who's saying that Aristotle was Battus. You'll understand in a second. Wishing to found the city of Cyrene, received an oracle to the following effect. O Battus, thou didst come about a voice, but Phobos, even Lord Apollo, sends thee forth to fair-crowned Libya. By the way, the Pisos were the consuls in northern Africa or Libya at a period of time. There to rule all, it goes on and on, reserved for kings. Okay, Battus means tongue-tied. In the Greek mythologies, Battus witnessed Hermes stealing the cattle of Apollo. And he paid off Battus with a heifer, with a cow, to shut him up. So Hermes comes back a couple of days disguised. This is the legend. I had to read this stuff. And he winds up disguised, and he comes across Battus, and he wants to finding out where the cattle are, and he bribes him, and Battus tells him what happened to the cattle. So Hermes then turns him into stone, like a stone statue. Okay, so sit back and realize what's just happened. You've got Emperor Trajan, who was alive during some of this stuff and what Piso was doing, makes this story up, linking Aristotle with Battus and Apollo, and they all know from the legend that Battus was basically a liar, from the legend. Okay, so let's go into some more research. Here's a Roman statue, 1st and 2nd century, of Apollo. Here's another one of Apollo in the Vatican. They certainly know who they are. This is in, I think, Denmark in a museum. Here's the Greek god Eris, also in the Vatican, the god of war. Now ask yourself, what's the Catholic Church doing with a Greek god of war and of everything else? This guy was the god of the sun, the light, medicine, you name it, he was the god of it. Now, they look kind of similar, don't they? So let's look at close-ups. There's Apollo, there's Eris. Gee, I'd say that's the same person. What do you think? Guess what? It is. Now I'm going to tell you the story. This is Barbara Rosenfeld gave me, she was into the Temple of Vesta and the Roman religions. She helped in deciphering this, which I'll go through on part 2 also, so you understand why this is all done. This is the headdress of the Temple of Vesta. This crown on top of here means she was the head virgin. She was the one who was charged. This story shows up in Suetonius, The Lives of Caesar, and there's the reference. Now, Suetonius was the pen name of Arrius Calpurnius Piso's grandson through his adopted daughter, Claudia Phoebe, and he becomes Antonius Pius. And so that's who Suetonius actually is. And he's telling what happened to his great-grandmother. So this is what would look like probably with the Temple of Vesta, maybe just before 37, before she was 37 years old. Here's after she got out of it. It's the same face, same mouth, same eyebrows, same nose, same everything. The story is this. Oh, here's our Apollo, Eris, and Apollo. It's the same face as the mother, isn't it? This is the father, Gnaeus Caesar Germanicus, also known as Caligula. Now, what Suetonius tells us is that she was bequeathed to, supposed to marry Gaius Calpurnius Piso, who I showed you a picture of. It doesn't look anything like any of them. And on the wedding day, hey, they invited this guy to the wedding. He winds up instructing his guards to take her to his house. He keeps her there for about a month, uses her real good, and sends her back. Now, one story that he gives is that supposedly he divorced her. It's like after 2 years, I think it went back to the husband. She went immediately back to the husband. She did. 9 months later, guess who's born? Him. That's not the picture of Apollo or Eris. Guess what face they use and why Piso, writing as Plutarch, mentions it so many times. It's him in his early 20s. And the face of Numa Pompeius, that's him when he was in his 50s or 60s. It's him. Him, Arius. Just amazing. Looks like the father, same features of the father and the mother. There's no question about it. And Suetonius, Antoninus Pius, the emperor's telling us, yes, that's what happened. I'll go on. Here's the fifth writer, Status Arian, son of Claudia Phoebe, brother of Emperor, brother of the emperor that I just showed you, Antoninus Pius. He's writing also and contributing to it. Appian, well, doesn't mention the pieces though. Let me go on further. Licinius was Emperor Marcus Aurelius. He was against what the Pisos were doing. In this volume it says something, Dead Come to Life or The Fisherman. That's the title. He is the kind that claims the name of Aristotle. He's saying in here, the person he's talking about is a kind of the man who claimed the name Aristotle. He's hinting that what you're reading in Aristotle is not this Greek, it's a Roman. This geographer, I haven't been able to identify who it is, but it mentions a statue of Aristotle in Thrace. Well, it's not really of Aristotle, it's probably of one of the Piso pseudonyms, Apollo or Eris. Here's the sixth author, Gilles, or Gillen, the father of Roman medicine. So everything about medicine and stuff like that in Aristotle was really this Roman. And these are the volumes that he talks about. Here's the seventh author, Ulpian, A.K. Origen, and that's his full name there. Mentions Piso 6 times, Lucius Piso 2 times, Piso, about a grammarian. He's the grammarian that was mentioned earlier by Titus. That's the seventh author. Oh, he mentions Aristotle 74 times, just to make sure you don't miss the fact that he helped write it. Gillius, Attic Nights, goes on. Okay, so here's the quote. Brother of Emperor Marcus Aurelius. And he cites Aristotle as authority for his statement in regard to both the 8th and 11th month. Now, the reason for this disagreement is, this is about how long it takes someone to give birth, 8 months or up to his 11th month. Nobody's giving birth 11 months. 8 and 11 is 19. Piso in Greek small numbering totals 19. That's really what he's saying. Dio Cassius Dio is a shorter version or of Ulpian and of the Pisos. They occasionally mention Aristotle, but that's about it. Mentioned Apollo, Apollonius, which is Arius. Apollonius of Tyana. Domitius Ulpianus or Ulpian, descendant of Emperor Trajan, and was a Greek neo-Pythagorean. Remember when the other guy said Pythagorean? He's giving the clues here of what happened. Lucius Flavius Philostratus, a Piso. Again, the same thing here. After studying of Plato and Aristotle, he devoted himself to the knowledge of the gods and to the wisdom of which the guardians were Pythagoras and those who followed Pythagoras. It goes on, how long? Okay, Apollonius of Tyana and those who revered Apollonius, a man who only seemed to have a body and be human. In other words, he's saying he's not really human. He's a man, but not really human. Gee, I wonder who else would fit that bill. Okay, goes on. Here's your eighth. Plautius. This is Eusebius. There was 3 Eusebiuses. This is the father. His son wrote as Eusebius, and the grandson wrote as also Eusebius III. And this is how many times? 27 times he mentions Aristotle, and he basically finishes it off. Goes on. After that, they had the whole thing finished off, and there's been a long list of how many books that are attributed to Aristotle, but now you know it really isn't at all. Goes on and on throughout history. All these people are descended, they're writing about it, are descended from the Pisos. Valerius Paterculus, Roman history. The great philosophers too, who received their impressions from the lips of Socrates, their names we gave a moment ago. How long did they flourish after the death of Plato and of Aristotle? Footnote, they do not occur in the extent of portion. Okay, this is all the places I found where they quote an Aristotle, but it's not in our current Aristotle at all, which gives you an idea that what they're reading is not what we're reading at all. In other words, the Pisos got these scraps that survived, and if they didn't like it, they chucked it out. And they rewrote the thing. I'm not going to go through this in great, because I'm already running long. Has been lost, not founded on Aristotle, now lost, not in Aristotle. This is just Cicero. Strabo, have not been found. Strabo, again, a fragment otherwise unknown. Strabo, it no longer extant. Strabo again, otherwise unknown. Strabo, more, no reference to the such and such. Strabo, again, the text is corrupt. Seneca the Younger, not known where it is, otherwise unknown, not in the extent of problems, which are disputed authenticity. They're saying it's a fraud. Yeah. Okay. As Aristotle, God is incorporeal and limit of heaven. Footnote, this definition of God is not in our Aristotle. In other words, you don't know what you're reading. Some science philosophy, this I'll deal with, I'll go into. The idea of the ether theory finally died in the 19th century. Now you know where it came from. Here, the ether theory. Jupiter is the ether. The big God is Jupiter. Seneca the Younger. Again, Stoics believe in one cause only, the maker. Aristotle thinks that the cause can be used in 3 ways. The first cause, he says, is the actual matter without which nothing can be created. There's the essence of your matter theory of existence. Second is the workman, the guy who fashions the matter into something. The third is the form, the idea. So that's the point of the word. A statue, for example, this is what Aristotle calls the eidos. Plutarch, again, this is Arius Calpurnius Piso. Nevertheless, even if this world of ours is only one ever created, as Aristotle also thinks, even ours, he says, is in a way put together through such and such. There's the idea that the Earth was the center of our solar system and maybe galaxy from Aristotle, which is really from Piso. Having just a moment ago given you an account of the Tuni mathematical foreknowledge of the reversal of the sun, you got that? Of the reversal of the sun, of which Aristotle is a witness. The ancients knew, well, the sun didn't reverse, the earth did around it. They knew that the earth stopped its rotation and went in the other direction during the cataclysm. Now, obviously, Aristotle wasn't, when this was written, 10,000 years old, and to see this thing. So this is obviously false, but they're right about the polar reversal. But it's not the sun that reversed, it was us. Okay. But if we neglect the incorpuscular substances and confine the name nature to corpuscular substances so that they alone appear to possess the nature of substance, which is viewed of Aristotle, in other words, there's your matter theory of existence, everything that's a matter. We shall define nature as that those do who have posted nature not existing except in bodies. In other words, everything is matter and nothing else is matter. The last of it. Okay, the answer is that something like matter, there is form, since the soul too is form, can be matter to something else. It goes on. It is matter in the sense that it is thought of a double, but both form and matter are one nature. You know, the form, the matter are one in the nature, as Aristotle too says. And like I said in the beginning of this video, there's a reason why he wanted this philosophy rather than Plato's. Okay, this is near the end. The death of the writer Juvenal and Tacitus marked the end of writing permitted to be done by non-members of the Piso family. Thereafter, family members exclusively did all the writings, histories, biographies, rhetoric, philosophy, Christian writings, astronomy, geography, early science fiction, medicine, table talk, tidbits. I'll add to that, mathematics and medicine. They would use innumerable pseudonyms, but family members alone would have exclusive control and right to do writings and to have their writings survive. Two family members, Timothy, who's the son of Fabius Justus, it was Arius Calpurnius Piso's grandson, and Marcus Aurelius, that was the emperor, but also related to the Pisos, would be permitted because of their high status to write coded anti-Christian stories without them later being destroyed. But the composition of writings would become the exclusive preview of family members or their close relations and friends. So what are we left with now? I think I've irrefutably proven the matter theory of existence that our science is based on. That's the foundation philosophy that you're stuck with. You have built a house of cards, not on shifting sand. You could drive a car on wet sand. You built it on the lies of the Pisos, on talcum powder. And I just took it away from you. You inherited what they wanted you to believe, and you were thoroughly brainwashed from the entire time, from grade school to when you got your PhD or master's, and that's what you were thinking. You thought nothing else, you couldn't think outside the box, and now you understand basically you've been had. Many of you are atheists and agnostics, and I understand why. You were laughing at the theologians, but really they were laughing at you. You were taken, you were fooled, And there was really no way you could ever figure this stuff out unless you became a scholar in Roman history and church history. Anyway, I have a feeling you'll learn something. I know some of it may have been too turgid and too long, but it took me 3 months to do the research on this, but it's irrefutable. Again, if you want to get a copy of the research I did, the Word file and some other stuff, $20 contribution to the Dihel Foundation, and give me your address. And if you want to, you can send me a SIM chip. I'll download the stuff onto it and mail it back to you. Thank you very much. Here's the information if you want to get a copy of the Word file, 115 pages of all the times that Aristotle and Piso and a few other things show up in the Loeb's classics. You could send a donation no less than $20 to the Dihel Foundation through our PayPal account, which is research@dihelfoundation.com. We're a tax-deductible 501c3 science foundation. We normally send it and burn it on a CD, and we send it first-class mail. If your PC can't take a CD or you don't have the external CD players, you could send us a memory chip or a CD chip or a memory stick and mail it to us to this address here, 11250 Old St. Augustine Road, Suite 15-Suite 133, Jacksonville, Florida, 32257. And mail it to us, and I'll copy it onto your chip and then mail it back to you. That's about it. And you'll get a lot of information. I'm going to include also the family tree of the Pisos that my friend Bernard Green did, and a few other things also. I think you'll enjoy it. Dihel Foundation is a 501c3, as I mentioned. We do accept contributions. It helps us do this kind of research and pay for, internet connection and actually membership in a lot of journals. That's basically what happens. Anyway, thank you for listening.